Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Rooted in Research, Greening Cities for Health, Safety, and Well-Being. I'm Eric Bradlow, Professor of Marketing, Statistics, and Data Science, and Vice Dean of Analytics at the Wharton School. I'm thrilled to introduce what has turned out to be an all-star panel today. Your moderator is my friend and colleague, Susan Wachter, the co-director of Penn's Institute for Urban Research, and she'll be speaking with Matt Rader, President of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, and also two of my Penn colleagues, Professors John McDonald and Shane Jensen, and Michelle Kondo, a research social scientist with the USDA Forest Service. In the simplest terms, this panel is about the greening of vacant lots in Philadelphia, taking space that appears blighted and run down and turning it into a welcome shared asset for a community. Without giving too much away, I think everyone that isn't familiar with the benefits of this greening program will be highly surprised by not only the different ways it impacts a community, but also by just how deeply those impacts are felt. As the Vice Dean of Analytics at Wharton, I'm especially pleased with the work these folks have done throughout the partnership between PHS and Penn, because it seems perfectly situated at the intersection of business, data science, and for good, or if you'd like, #impact analytics initiatives. This type of high-quality research wouldn't be possible without the rich and valuable data from PHS, and we wouldn't be able to arrive at the insights you're about to hear without the dedication of our world-class faculty. This has been a testament to the ability of community-focused organizations and dedicated researchers to work together to make lasting impacts for their communities. With that, I'll hand it over to your host, Susan Wachter.
Welcome all, and we thank Eric Bradlow for that wonderful introduction to today's program, Rooted in Research, Greening Cities for Health, Safety, and Well-Being. And we thank you for coming to today's program. I am Susan Wachter, and I am thrilled to be moderating today's panel. And we are so pleased to have with us, to start us off, Matt Rader, President of Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, who will introduce the transformative program Land Care and related initiatives, which have sparked and inspired the research you will hear from our panelists. Matt, please begin.
Thank you, Susan, for inviting me and for that introduction. I'm going to share a couple of slides here. Hopefully this works. Okay, so I am Matt Rader. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, and I wanted to introduce you to our work so you have context for how the work has come to be that the research looks at. So PHS is an old organization founded in 1827 and always committed to using horticulture as a tool to improve Philadelphia and its region. And today we are focused on using horticulture to try to improve health outcomes by addressing 4 social determinants of health: access to healthy food, access to economic opportunity, livable environments, and social connections. And we believe that horticulture is a tool that individuals, governments, organizations can use to move these social determinants and in turn yield health. We work through 4 channels to try to make that happen. So we have Philadelphia Flower Show, which is the nation's largest horticulture event, where we promote ideas about how horticulture can be used to deliver social and environmental health. We work with home gardeners to implement practices that advance health. We maintain a network of more than 20 public gardens and landscapes, which role model and embody horticulture as a tool for social environmental health. And then we have a Healthy Neighborhoods program that delivers on-the-ground greening services in more than 250 neighborhoods. And that's really where we're going to focus today. Healthy Neighborhoods for us is about using different horticultural tactics hand in hand and in support of residents. And I know there are many people who are involved with us on the call today, and I appreciate you being here. We work through 4 different tactics. So community gardens, people coming together to form and care for vegetable gardens largely, planting and stewarding trees, creating green stormwater infrastructure, and maintaining vacant land and developing workforce opportunities through that. All of these are delivered in support of community aspiration and hand in partnership with community residents and organizations. I hope the echo has been resolved. I just saw the chat. Apologies. So why do we do this? We know that health outcomes can correlate with social and environmental factors. I picked 2 neighborhoods here, both served by PHS Healthy Neighborhoods program. And you can see that health outcomes vary, as do indicators and conditions in built environment like vacant buildings and tree canopy. And so this helps us see an opportunity, and the research we're going to talk about today and others shows more that opportunity. So we like to say that the common point of view is that trees and gardens in public are kind of nice to have. These are things that should be done where philanthropy allows or where volunteers are willing to do it. And we disagree with that point of view. We believe that having a well-gardened public realm, trees, well-gardened public spaces, community gardens, etc., is a must-have element of a healthy neighborhood. And doing so can affordably and equitably advance health and well-being. This belief drives much of the work we do in healthy neighborhoods. There's a really important idea here, which is, I think in the current zeitgeist, there's a lot of people identifying gaps in greening. And there's also a lot of policy being created at city and state and federal levels to try to act on those insights. But the actual ability to execute is a key capability. And that's really what PHS brings to the table. So if a law was passed that said we're going to restore tree canopy in Philadelphia to 30% next year, that's a good thing. And if it's resourced, that's even better. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the ability to deliver. And that's where PHS has built incredible sophistication. And that takes strong relationships with the community. It takes the operational capacity to actually do the work, it takes partnerships with small businesses, nonprofits, residents, others, and it takes a constant drumbeat to raise dollars from all sources to make this happen. And for us, the path from ideas or known opportunities to impact does not just go through policy, it goes through the ability to build really effective operations, and that's what we do. So today we're looking specifically at vacant land. So Philadelphia is a city that had a population decline in mid-century, like many older industrial cities, and it left us with about 40,000 vacant parcels. This number is a moving target, and you'll see a range as you Google. In most cases, these are negative contributors to community life. So they're unmaintained, unless maintained by the owner. And they quickly become negative. You can see here short dumping, litter collection, invasive plants, etc. And the basic premise of land care, the basic function, is to clean and green these vacant lots to turn them into neighborhood assets. So at the most basic level, PHS Land Care replaces the trash and weeds with green elements, trees, grass, a simple fence that always has an opening for pedestrians. This work is funded largely by the city of Philadelphia, but also with support from the Philadelphia Flower Show, our members, and others. We build a second layer of impact by working through a network of contractors and community groups to do the work. So we're not just hiring a large landscape contract to execute on maintaining these lots. We've built the infrastructure to put that work in the hands of small businesses and community organizations. And then we add a third layer of impact by working with those contractors to hire people who need access to jobs. And so together, these 3 layers of impact create some powerful moves on those social determinants of health that PHS seeks to address. And the research, which the group today will talk about, has shown material benefits on lots of fronts, including reducing violence, mental health, and other community factors. Just to give you a sense of before and after, this is a before lot, and the after condition is this. So you see grass and trees, you see the site leveled, you see the installation of a basic wooden fence, which is very different than a cyclone fence, creates a sense of dignity. There's always a pedestrian opening, which you can see partway down the block here. And that allows these sites to not only become passive contributors to neighborhood life, but also active contributors as gathering spaces, play spaces, etc. We've done this treatment with the support of the city and others on 13,000 lots around Philadelphia. So these 13,000 lots are now positively contributing to community life. They're creating economic opportunities for small businesses and community organizations, and they're creating employment. And altogether, the program creates about 300 job equivalents per year. We talked a little bit about workforce development, which is the job component. We do a paid workforce development program throughout the year that works with people seeking stable jobs. There are many green jobs in our region, and builds basic training in green jobs and also the supportive skills that people need to thrive in employment, and provides support for people as they make their first steps into their careers. So with that, I'll say thank you. Everything at PHS is supported by a large cast of characters, people who volunteer their time, join us as members, become advocates. This program is no different. So if you want to get involved, please do, and check out our website to learn more. Thank you, Susan. Back to you.
Thank you, Matt. We are so pleased to have you with us today, and we thank you again for that comprehensive overview of this inspiring work. And to begin our panel on the research on the impact of this work, we turn to John McDonald, who is professor of criminology and sociology at the University of Pennsylvania. John?
Great, thanks for having me. I just wanted to say that this work, I'm just going to present some of our most recent work on the land care program, and just say that it was actually initially inspired by both Susan's work on looking at land care and real estate, and also by members of the community who in focus groups had brought up the importance that vacant lot remediation had in terms of their sense of safety and well-being. So what I'm going to show today is I'm going to just show some highlights of a more recent study we published that focuses on the benefits of vacant lot remediation in terms of public safety. But before I kind of show you the research, I just want to point out that when it comes to issues like gun violence in the city of Philadelphia, that violence and particular shootings are highly concentrated by place. So this just gives you a quick graph to show you that something like 2.3% of blocks in the city of Philadelphia are responsible for 50% of all reported shootings. And that when we get to about 11% of blocks, we've covered basically all the shootings that happened between 2015 and 2020. And the point of showing this graph is just to make the case that if we think about ways to reduce problems like gun violence in communities, we should be thinking a lot more about the role of place. And the PHS land care program, even though it wasn't designed specifically for the issues of gun violence and public safety, it turns out that our research has shown that that is one of its many benefits. So what I'm going to highlight today is just some findings from one of our more recent studies that looks at the crime-reducing benefits of vacant lot remediation. And it combines both kind of the long-term effects of the program as well as some replication of the experiment that we conducted in partnership with PHS. The experiment was originally the principal investigator on that was Charlie Brannis, who's a co-author on this paper, now a professor at Columbia University. So why do we think vacant lot remediation might have such a tremendous benefit in terms of public safety? Well, it connects to some basic ideas we have in environmental criminology that suggest that when you change a place, the physical environment to make it more attractive, you can enhance community collective efficacy. So when people see a lot that's overgrown with trash and debris, for example, it may present a hole in kind of the social fabric. People may be more afraid, less willing to engage in intervene when they witness criminal activity, and it may just kind of shape that unconscious sense of place. And it also connects to theories like broken windows theory that just suggests that physical disorder could lead to a reduction in formal social control of place. So, the idea that vacant lot remediation may help reduce serious crime and violence in communities is actually consistent with theories in criminology. So what do we find? We actually looked at, over a long period of time, the PHS land care program. And so we looked at it over 2006 to 2018. And what we did is we compared lots that were treated during that period. So these are the lots that were adapted as Matt had mentioned, that were brought into the program. And we compared those to lots nearby that had similar characteristics in terms of levels of crime, and were in similar levels of poverty in neighborhoods, etc. And what we found is that by remediating vacant lot, we saw significant reductions in robbery, 21%. We saw significant reductions in drug-related offenses, public order violations, and overall, we found that there was almost a 6% reduction in total reported crime, simply associated with this land care program. Well, that study, that analysis was not an experiment. It was kind of doing the best you can in terms of matching lots that were remediated versus those that still remain in a state of disrepair. Now, we had the benefit of our partnership with PHS to actually do an experiment, and we've published several studies on that. And so the benefits of the experiment is we actually get to randomize lots to be cleaned and greened or remain in some state of disrepair. And from that study, we found there was reductions in gun violence. We found the actual shootings went down. We found major reductions in assaults, gun assaults, especially in high poverty neighborhoods. And I'm just going to show you kind of an update on those results from this paper. So when we looked at actual levels of crime reported, we found significant reductions in robbery, assault, drug offenses, public order, and overall a reduction of about 12%. And so this is just pointing out that the reductions we saw in the study that was comparing vacant lots that were remediated through land care to the ones that weren't, we found similar results even in an experiment that was highly controlled. So this just, I think, gives you some compelling evidence that vacant lot remediation is one of many efforts that communities can engage in to help reduce crime. And we have the benefit of the model program PHS that is actually doing that here in the city. So thank you very much for allowing me to share that research, and look forward to future collaborations.
Thank you so much, John. And now we have the great pleasure of turning to Rochelle Kondo, who is a research associate at the Forest Service of the USDA, and who has done important work on the social impact of greening vacant lots. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I am going to share some slides and tell you a little bit about some other and additional work that I have done, through my collaborations with John and Charlie and Land Care, of course, on their important program, at PHS. And so, I have been engaged in other studies, in addition to the study of land care, but of other vacant lot greening programs, for example, with the University of Michigan, and working in Flint and Youngstown, and as well as in New Orleans. And so have been thinking about this type of study and looking to see patterns. Is this a type of intervention that is and can be viewed across the board as a violence prevention strategy? And so, for example, my colleagues and I published. This is led by Hassam Safavi. He is, so anyway, it's a meta-analysis of existing studies, and this was published, I believe, last year, so already a tiny bit dated, but we found 8 before and after studies with control groups of vacant lot remediation programs. And not all of them were of this, the clean and green model that you're seeing here, like land care. Some of them involved just mowing, and some involved gardening, additional like gardening interventions. And we found that these programs were being run in large, medium, and small cities. But we found that from looking at their estimates that the greening and gardening interventions reduced firearm violence by between 5.3 and 5.8%. 5.8 and 5.3% respectively at the greening and versus the gardening interventions, although we didn't see statistically significant reductions when considering the whole group by just the mowing intervention. But I should say that the land care program really stood out, among the interventions that we saw, and sort of the scale at which the program operates, throughout the city. 13,000 vacant lots. It's a really significant program, and provides an important model across the country. So I have been involved in other studies to question more about, well, how is this working? And could there be more and other different types of outcomes if we looked at more of the process, the way that vacant lots are greened? And in particular, in sort of diving into some of those theoretical mechanisms that John talked about, like how is it that a vacant lot greening and maintenance could result in decreased violence? And it has to do with a lot of those social processes that happen, perhaps as a result of the greening. So I've been involved in a couple of projects. One, this is in collaboration with the Urban Health Lab and Gina South at the University of Pennsylvania on the nature, as well as PHS, of course, around their land care program, and sort of we're calling it, a second or another version of a land care intervention that involves community engagement, visioning. There was a visioning process around, we had 4 different sites. These were sort of aggregated sets of vacant lots. Together with PHS and Olin Architects, we engaged nearby residents to ask, well, what exactly would you like to see on these vacant lots, to transform them into community spaces. And pictured here is one in West Philadelphia, the Memorial Garden, that was transformed and dedicated to victims of violence. So we have done some research and working on publishing our results, but it's been really significant, sort of the impact of the spaces and the community involvement in the transformation and subsequent use of the spaces in terms of the impacts that we think that we might see. This is another and less recent study, but many of my more recent studies are building off of this study that we did with the Lots of Green program in Youngstown, Ohio. They asked us to look at and evaluate the impacts of their clean and green program which actually had two different versions. One was the more traditional, like contractors come in and clean and green the lots, versus a second, what we called a community reuse type, where residents could apply for support to green their lots. And most of those vacant lots were turned into community gardens. And we found actually difference in the types of impacts that we saw. We saw more significant reductions in more property crimes surrounding this contractor cleaning green lots versus more significant reductions in violent crimes surrounding the community reuse lots. So that sort of gave us this sort of, question or motivation to look into the role of community involvement and sustained presence in both the transformation and the maintenance of vacant spaces in terms of violence prevention. I've done some other research. So, I work for the Forest Service, so I'm always thinking about trees and interventions involving trees. And violence prevention is a huge issue, and I guess a goal, I suppose, in cities such as Philadelphia. So one, and perhaps the tree canopy can make a difference. So I wanted to share this study that I did in collaboration with Doug Wiebe, who was the PI, on a study where about 130 victims of gun assault were recruited from a nearby hospital. And so interviewers asked to these gunshot assault victims to describe their paths throughout the day prior to their assault. We also recruited controls, so community controls. These are individuals who lived in similar neighborhoods and were similar demographically, but were not victims of gun assaults. So using these sort of location-based interviews about their paths throughout the day, we could look to see, well, what role did being under tree canopy cover at the time of gun assault play, and perhaps the risk of gun assault. So, and in fact, we found highly significant statistically that being under tree canopy cover was inversely associated with gunshot assault, especially in low income areas. So approximately a 30% lower odds. And that is comparing the cases to the controls. We also found using a different method, a case crossover. So comparing the case, the individuals that had been assaulted at the time of assault compared to the rest of their day, and even higher reduced odds. I can say in just a couple minutes, there's just a huge and expanding body of research on the association between, exposure to natural environments and health, human health. And I am, I play some role in building this body of evidence, but there is good evidence now about, that being exposed and living in greener environments can help reduce our stress levels, improve our life expectancy, improve our mental health, our ability to focus. There are many issues with some of these studies. There's a lot of it is cross-sectional, so there's room for improvement in terms of gathering that causal evidence, but we're getting there. And so I've been involved as well in sort of helping to make use of this information to run, for example, a health impact assessment of Philadelphia's green tree canopy plan for, let's see, it was back in 2014. We took the goal for 2025, which was a 30% tree canopy cover throughout the city. Using health impact assessment methods and existing sort of risk ratios that have been published based on about 8 million participants about our lower risk of premature mortality with increasing green space or exposure around our residents, that getting to that 30% level could help prevent premature deaths annually in Philadelphia. And so, I mean, of course, I think half the paper we talked about, well, the limitations and the realities, and the barriers of getting to that 30%. But you know, there's a vision there, and so we are able to sort of make estimates about what benefits this might bring. And finally, I'm starting to think about, well, not just only measuring you know, health and safety outcomes, but using health disparities as the outcome, if the goal is to actually reduce these disparities. So can trees not only improve health, but help reduce health disparities? And so this is just a recent study published where we found, yeah, it's a reduction in, you know, socioeconomic inequalities in self-reported mental health conditions with increasing green space exposure using evidence from and data from Philadelphia. So thank you. Thanks again for having me. And I'm going to pass it back to Susan.
And I apologize for for being muted. And it's our great pleasure to now turn to Professor of Statistics and Data Science at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, who will discuss and describe recent work done in collaboration with Professor Desson Lin of the California State University at Fullerton and Research Fellow at Penn IUR. Please go ahead.
All right, Susan, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Shane Jensen. I'm a professor of statistics in the Wharton School here at the University of Pennsylvania, where I've been teaching for almost 20 years now. My primary research focus over the past few years has been in the domain of urban analytics. My work is focused on using high-resolution data to explore the association between aspects of the local built environment in cities and, you know, their potential impact on the social and economic functioning of urban neighborhoods. Interventions such as the land care program run by the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society are really our best way to learn about how improvements in the built environment can provide multifaceted benefits to urban residents and urban spaces. I am one of several researchers that has been empirically evaluating these benefits of the land care program. I was first introduced to this program by John McDonald, who you've already heard from, who has been a wonderful collaborator, and I'm very happy that he is here on this panel to talk to you, to kind of mention some of his work and our work on the impact of vacant lot greening on safety. I'm going to instead kind of focus my own comments on my more recent collaboration with Susan Wachter on evaluating the impact of vacant lot greening on nearby real estate value. These evaluations that we're doing to try and establish this impact involve several kind of statistical challenges, which are very much of interest to me. Chief among them being that the locations where greening occurs differ systematically in their surrounding neighborhood, economic and demographic context and characteristics from the ungreened lots that we would like to use as kind of controls in all of our comparisons. Just as one example of that phenomenon, greened vacant lots tend to be more concentrated in neighborhoods with already higher land vacancy, and tend to occur and serve communities with lower median household income than, you know, the kind of ungreened lots that we would like to use as a control group. And so we need to kind of, when doing our comparisons, we need to be very thoughtful and careful and adjust for these differences, as well as taking into account, when looking at real estate value as an outcome, overall trends in real estate value that are occurring in different areas of the city. And so we use repeated sales data, as well as some pretty sophisticated housing pricing models to estimate an average increase in value of about 4.3% within the first year for a property located nearby to a greened lot. Now, given the typical number of properties that are nearby to each of these greening locations, the total benefit in real estate value that we could sort of kind of estimate for an area around one of these greened lots is on the scale of about $200,000 a year. And I want to kind of compare that with the much lower total cost of greening and maintaining that lot, which is more on the scale of a couple $1,000s. So you can kind of see that there's the benefits, this one particular benefit is, almost magnitudes greater than the kind of cost of doing the greening intervention. I think our work could have a lot of impact as we continue to establish vacant lot greening as a kind of a model for repurposing urban land that is, as I've mentioned, kind of relatively low cost, but with multidimensional benefits and impacts. We've already found, John and Michelle have already talked about positive benefits for neighborhood safety. I've mentioned some of my own work just now about positive benefits for real estate value. That impact of real estate value, that research in that is ongoing. We plan to explore how benefits can whether benefits can the benefit can vary depending on the kind of surrounding neighborhood context, whether vacant lot, a green vacant lot can then lead to a new cafe in a neighborhood, which has its own benefits, etc. And in the future, I would also like to investigate the impact of vacant lot greening on other neighborhood outcomes, for which we will need to acquire different types of data. For example, kind of, again, as Michelle alluded to, kind of trying to get to the process of how vacant lot greening improves safety and other impacts. I'd like to really explore the effects of greening on actual foot traffic and public use of these green spaces. And I would also like to kind of look at the potential for greening to help mitigate increasing temperatures as cities continue to adapt to climate change. And so it's a very exciting area of research for me, and I'm very happy to be here to share it with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shane. And we'd like to remind our listeners that the research that has been presented today, along with this recording, will be available at the Penn Institute of Research website going forward. And we'd also now want to turn to discussion among our panelists. So if all panelists would turn on their video. And let me start with Matt Rader, if I may. Matt, how important is the long-term commitment and commitment to the neighborhoods with whom you work, and the collaboration with neighborhood institutions in the city itself to your program success?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's something that distinguishes what is happening in Philadelphia. It takes long-term commitment to all these programs. So if we're going to support people to form a tree tender group in their neighborhood, that can't be a one planting cycle or 1 year relationship. It needs to be a commitment that they are making to their neighborhood on a long term, and that we're committed to support them. And to do that, we have to seek out long-term recurring funding sources, and we have to make sure that we can commit to the capacity to support them year in and year out. And that applies across trees, community gardens, and vacant land. And I do think that in most cases, philanthropy and in some cases, government projects these days are funded as short-term projects, a year, 2, 3 of funding. And that's not what these needs. These are permanent social and physical changes in neighborhood fabric, and that requires long-term support. And that's really what PHS sets out to do through our fundraising efforts, through the Philadelphia Flower Show, which is a fundraiser, et cetera. But it takes long-term commitment. These are not projects. These are added layers of life.
Thank you very much for that, Matt, and for your work. And now let me turn to our researchers. We all know that our research builds upon the research of others. So can you describe how your research has built on and contributed? And perhaps we can start with you, Shane.
Sure. I mean, I think there's at least two kind of different aspects in which I've kind of tried to build on the research of others in doing these evaluations. The first one is, we're kind of leaning on a lot of research and sort of how to actually analyze and create apple-to-apple comparisons when doing these evaluations. So there's a lot of statistical research. I mean, John mentioned matching, for example, as a kind of general technique for how we might come up with sort of the best possible comparison. A particular green lot that we would like to kind of evaluate the impact of, we want to kind of ground that within the context of say, compared to an ungreen lot that has a very similar surrounding neighborhood context economically and demographically. And so we use like kind of matching techniques that have been established and you know, over the past couple decades in statistics in order to do that kind of evaluation. Or obviously the housing pricing models that we used in our own paper, you know, are based on kind of research in terms of how to kind of, you know, best control for different aspects of you know, housing when doing pricing. So that's kind of on the more methodological kind of part of our evaluations that I think, you know, we're really leaning on, you know, the shoulders of previous researchers. But I think there's also, you know, as John kind of reviewed a little bit, there's such a strong literature in urban planning and criminology about, you know, what type of impact, you know, what type of impacts we might expect to see that help us help us generate hypothesis as well as kind of interpret results and lead us in sort of, you know, like part of my kind of motivation for looking at kind of the surrounding built environment as a potential, like, you know, kind of mitigator or interacting effect on vacant lot greening, it comes from this wealth of kind of urban planning and criminology literature that tells us kind of, or gives us kind of hypotheses and theories as far as how, you know, something like increased use of a public space may have downstream effects on things like real estate value or safety. And so I think, you know, it's both in terms of kind of the methods that we use are very much kind of grounded in, you know, previous work that people have done, as well as kind of how we interpret and kind of generate the questions that we would like to ask, I think is very much motivated by the literature in our fields.
Thank you, Shane. And I want to turn to John and Michelle, but I also want to broaden the question. You know, it's common sense that greening and maintenance of vacant blighted lots that are turned to, been reinvested in, that are green, improves lives. So what are the benefits of doing research? How were you motivated to, and based on previous work, how was your work connected to previous work, and how were you motivated to do this when it's, after all, common sense? What did you see as the contribution of research itself? Who wants to take that on first? John, Michelle? John, you're smiling. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, obviously, you know, there's research in the past, but very rarely do we have opportunities to actually observe something change and then see what happens. And so as much as once we find these effects, you can say, oh yeah, this just seems like common sense. Until you have that evidence, that scientific evidence, I think it's up for dispute. People will say that there must, you know, it can't have that big of an effect, you know, because they just don't believe it. And, you know, having the benefit of a program like Land Care that's constantly adapting, that also did participate, you know, that we did an experiment with, I think provides that kind of evidence base that says this isn't just common sense, there's also scientific evidence behind it. So I think that's when it's useful. But I agree. I mean, most of these ideas we have whether in urban planning, criminology, public health, are just common sense ideas that your average person living in a neighborhood would tell you, and they do. So, but it's good to then have data to back it up.
Michelle, do you want to add to that? Thank you, John.
Yeah, sure. And I would say that the type of evidence that we, at least we on this panel, are putting out there is just one type of evidence, and that it was missing or lacking. You know, we're talking maybe 5 years ago, even it just wasn't there. Maybe there were like little hints of it, but that it needs to be combined with other types of evidence, including stories and, you know, personal, you know, what's the word? Testimonies, right, about their lived experience. Yeah, I mean, that they need to go together. And I often hear, you know, well, we have evidence from a randomized controlled trial, you know, bring this to the legislators. You know, what about some more funding across the board for vacant lot greening? And It's not necessarily there, and Matt, you could probably speak to this, but what are the barriers there? And so often I hear like, well, I need to hear a story. I need to hear, this needs to be embodied for me. Like here's the numbers, here's the statistics, but I need a face on it. So I think we also need some skilled storytellers, the journalists, they play a huge role as well in putting all these pieces together.
Yeah, and I mean, if you don't mind me adding in a little bit, I think it's also, I think, more compelling to both media as well as kind of policymakers, if you can kind of provide an effect size. I mean, yeah, I think it is very common sense to say that vacant lot greening would have a positive impact, but be able to kind of measure that impact and be able to kind of compare it, to sort of the costs of the intervention. I mean, I think things like a cost benefit kind of analysis, I think that's probably how policymakers think about it. I mean, policymakers presumably are always doing some kind of very constrained kind of optimization about where money goes. And if you can sort of demonstrate that something has both very large of benefit, but also like, at a relatively low kind of cost, I think that makes for a more compelling story.
Well, thank you very much for these responses. And we do have a number of pressing questions, and there several go to the question of gentrification. So I want to come back to you, Shane, on this as well. So question is, are there thoughts about how the greening of vacant lots, which contributes to higher real estate values, which you just said is quantified, so how does this end up contributing to gentrification and the displacement of communities? And I'll just connect it to the next question, which is, does the connection between green vacant lots and increasing property values create concerns from nearby residents of gentrification? And then there's a related question that I will perhaps go to Matt after, which is, does the maintenance of the lot take a toll when community members are the ones responsible for maintaining these areas? So let me turn first to you, Shane, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, obviously with, our research, the research I focused on with real estate value does, I mean, I do think that kind of often kind of falls into the gentrification sort of like, thought or raises thoughts of gentrification, because we are talking about a benefit that's kind of mostly focused on kind of homeowners. But I would want to emphasize that, I mean, almost all of the benefits that we've talked about today, safety, mental health, all these types of things are things that are shared by all residents of the community. And I do think that vacant lot greening, of all the kind of interventions or kind of, sort of, things that we try and do to improve neighborhoods, I think vacant lot greening is something that is one of the most sort of public and shared by all kind of residents of the community type interventions, right? I mean, again, creating these public spaces that all residents can use provides sort of like essentially almost a ubiquitous benefit. And so I think, I mean, obviously, issues of gentrification we continue to think about, but I think vacant lot greening of all programs, I think is one that kind of is shared most kind of commonly across the entire neighborhood, regardless.
And I do want to thank you, Shay, for that point. It's an improvement for the neighborhood, for the people living in the neighborhood. And I do also want to return to our basic outcome, which is a 4% increase in the immediately surrounding properties. So actually, which about 20 properties surround each lot, it makes a difference for those people who are immediately exposed. But actually that 4% does not appear to be connected, at least in our research, to gentrification. With that, Matt, let me turn to perhaps what might be a misunderstanding on who's responsible and how does maintenance get paid for?
Absolutely. It's a good question. So first of all, I want to just give a shout out to Bob Grossman, who began this program, and Keith Green, who leads it today, and his whole team, as well as the whole crew of contractors and community organizations that collaborate with us. The maintenance of these lots is paid. So this is done through community organizations or small business contractors who in turn employ people to do the work. And that is by design, because that is how you get 2 additional layers of impact here, helping build up small businesses and community organizations, helping create direct employment. It also addresses the question, which I think is what was being asked, in that relying on volunteer support to deal with issues of this scale is not fair. Tree planting, community garden, vacant land cleaning and greening, volunteers make great strides in neighborhoods of all all contexts. But dealing with problems of this scale needs to be a service that is delivered on an ongoing basis. Community engagement must be at the core. It must be done in support of community aspirations, but it should not fall only on volunteers. As Michelle noted, there are benefits that accrue from doing things in a volunteer manner. So we deploy both paid techniques and volunteer techniques and are trying to figure out lots of different hybrid models, such as stipends for community people, involved youth jobs, et cetera, so that you retain the agency that comes with volunteer work, but don't retain the inequity that comes with relying on volunteers to do all the work.
So we do have a response. Thank you, Matt. People need to get paid, and this program does pay people. That's one of the goals, to train and bring people to good jobs that contribute to the neighborhood.
Can I mention one of the things too, on follow up on
Please.
Matt's point, which
Please
is
go ahead, John.
one of the reasons I think that Land Care is so successful as a program is because it isn't, it's a workforce development, it's a network that, Bob and Keith have built. Very few cities have anything like this. And often cities will try a volunteer, adopt a lot program, and it doesn't work. People are too busy. They don't have the resources, somebody moves, there's all the challenges with it. So this is, I think one of the reasons why it's successful is because—
John, I think you've hit on it. This is really key. And I want to bring Michelle into this conversation, perhaps back to Matt too. The importance of the commitment and the actual almost industrial scale of the effort in terms of bringing people to get the job done year after year and paying them. Are there other programs across the country like this that you can, Michelle, and you're looking at research elsewhere, that are in scale like this yet?
Well, there are sort of variations on it. Very many inspiring programs out there. Genesee County Land Bank over in Michigan. I mean, they are very well known and are dealing with sort of a different morphology, I guess, of vacancy, where the lots are much larger.
Right.
And so, the model here wouldn't necessarily work there.
Good point.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stop it there, because that's exactly right. These are small lots, and yet they can be very destructive because they're surrounded, and they can be very blighted, as we see from some of this picture. So I do want to say that we have a question. I think the audience has many questions of how can I help. And one particular one: how can one acquire, this is for you, Matt, please, how can one acquire a lot to maintain and create a greening space? I know of someone who lives by a lot that is garbage ridden. She is willing to clean up, care for it in the future. How can she help?
So if you're in Philadelphia, your first stop is your city councilperson's office. There are two different programs in the city that deal with lot cleaning. Land Care is a ongoing program that maintains lots once they've been stabilized. There's also the CLIP program, which is a one-time cleaning program. They're totally different programs. City council people refer to both, as well as Community Development Corporation. So I would say a call at your city council person's office with the address is the first step.
Thank you, Matt. And I'm going to turn back on a gentrification question that's specific to crime reduction and ask you, John, perhaps to weigh in. Can you discuss greening driving gentrification, and that as a cause of crime reduction, versus greening and retaining the original residents in a greened neighborhood and crime reduction?
Sure. We don't have any evidence of gentrification from the studies that we've done. Most of the places where we're finding the benefits are the average income level and the demographics of the neighborhoods do not change after the lots are greened. The work's being done by, as Matt has already mentioned, people, part of a network of people in the community that live in these communities. So I think it's a concern you would have if the land value is happening in a place that may be where there's a lot of speculation happening. So I understand it, kind of a natural concern. But we also have to recognize that Philadelphia was a city designed for almost 2 million people. And we have for a little 400,000 fewer residents. So there's lots of places here for us to build housing and have stable communities.
Thank you, John. And we are coming to the end of the program. I'm going to do a lightning round in a moment but first I want to ask Matt a question. And the lightning round would be short recommendation in the mayoral election coming up for how to green and if to green and how to help neighborhoods develop despite the challenges. Matt, my question to you is, how does research help you?
Research helps us tell the story. So despite compelling evidence, only 30% of vacant lots in Philadelphia are cleaned and green today. What about the other 70%? Similarly on trees, restoring tree canopy is not a priority at the highest level today. So more and more evidence that helps us tell the story, both to residents and to policymakers and payers and other civic leaders and business leaders who can help make this happen.
Thank you, Matt. And as we close, let me just remind folks that the programs listed and links to information on the program will be available at the Penn IUR website, as well as the research. And I will thank the panelists again in a moment. But first, who wants to get started in lightning round advice?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I would say that there is so much great know-how and expertise in terms of getting the trees in the ground on a part of PHS and the city. But it hasn't historically been the funding required to bring it to scale, get to that 30%, these big goals. Well, we have the Inflation Reduction Act funds, we have the infrastructure bill funds, $15 billion that is coming through the states and then through nonprofits. We are, that's a great opportunity to get some of the needed resources. So we need to team up and build some strong proposals.
Team up sounds right.
I'll follow up on that just to be like, as we convince the mayor to scale up a lot of these kind of really, beneficial interventions, I would also try and scale up the kind of data collection that we're doing at that scale. Again, I talked a little bit about how I would love to study how these green spaces affect temperatures. Well, we need, kind of very localized measurements of temperature at that. So temperature sensors while we're doing these interventions, stuff like this, so on the data collection front, think ahead when we're doing these interventions to how we might, how we want to evaluate their impact in the future.
I'm going to turn to you, John, and Matt in a moment, but I just want to be sure to get into our thank yous. I would like to thank all of you speakers today. You've been wonderful, and our co-hosts, the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society and Analytics at Wharton. And we'd also like to thank our partners who helped to promote this event, the Public Health Management Corporation, Urban Land Institute, Philadelphia, and the Weitzman School of Design. And thanks to Shin Kokalak and Erin Dunkel at PHS, Jillian Rogers and Kyle Kearns at Analytics at Wharton, and Penn IUR's Arden Jordan and Diana Lind. None of this could have been done without these folks' tremendous efforts. And you can contact us at Penn IUR for further information, but let me then turn it back to John first and then Matt for lightning response to the mayor.
I would tell the next mayor that for about a $15,000 to $20,000 investment in vacant lot remediation, we are can avert a shooting, single shooting, and for a $40 to $50 million investment up front, the city a program like land care could be expanded. I might be a little bit off on that number, but I think you could we could green the whole city. I mean, it's
green the whole city, John. I love it.
Green the whole city.
There you go. That's the call, Matt.
Ditto, John. Make restoring tree canopy and 100% of vacant lots clean and green just basic level of city service, and deploy that as a major creation of employment and business opportunity for small businesses.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you all, and thanks our audience. I hope to see you, Matt, and perhaps the audience too, March 4th through 12th at the best flower show in the country and the world. Thank you. Thanks to all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.